Hello and welcome to Invent Ed 2021, second day. We are so excited to have you back with us today. For those who weren't able to join us yesterday, quick introduction. My name is Corey Frazier, and I'm the founder and CEO of Uncommon and have been a longtime partner of the Invention Education Network. This is my fourth year of running this convening. Excuse me. As a reminder, we were joined this morning by a select group of partners to join us for the keynote session through a new program called InventEd Inspire. This morning, the InventEd Inspire folks also had a chance to sit in on a special session called InventEd 101, where they were able to learn about more about invention education and the work that the network is doing. Inspire folks, feel free to connect with members in the community tab and Attendify. Say hi, ask any questions that might have come up in that morning session. We're so excited to have you here. Quick note before I go any further, I also wanted to make an accessibility note. We have closed captioning available for the broadcast today. So for anyone who would like to use closed captioning, it's available by clicking on the letters CC in the toolbar below the webcast window. So please feel free to use that closed captioning. I also want to do two more shout outs before we get down to housekeeping and the agenda. The first, today we want to give a really special shout out and focus to the educators who are working every day to bring invention education to life in their classrooms, labs, out of school spaces. We actually have a quick video that we want to turn to that'll tell you a little bit more about the work that they're doing.
There are nearly 4 million teachers in America. Every one of them has a story to tell about why they love their work. Here is one teacher's story.
One of the biggest pieces that I, as a teacher, strive for and really pride myself on is the relationship with students. I don't just teach science, I teach social and emotional. I teach how they're going to cope with disappointment, how they're going to cope with success, how they're going to cope with different personalities. They have that kind of safe space to be able to experiment and do things that aren't assessment oriented. They have more of a freedom to grow and take a risk and do things that they otherwise wouldn't do in the classroom when their peers are looking at them and judging them. So it's a safe place for them to solve problems. They are actually taking physical things and putting them together and developing and going through what any engineer would go through. The design phase, the struggle phase, the success phase. We know that inventions are changing and improving, and who is going to lead that change, and that's our students. If I can get them engaged in something, then I have created a lasting relationship.
Thank you for inspiring us to invent. Thank you for teaching. #ThankATeacher. The Lemelson Foundation, improving lives through invention. Lemelson.org.
That's an incredible video, and we're so excited to have the educators here with us today. I also wanted to do another special shout out to another group. We have had with us on this journey all along an extraordinary group of InventEd Network members on our planning committee for this convening. So huge shout out. Gina's going to post their names in the chat so you can see all of your colleagues who've been a part of building this convening together. There's no way that we could have done this work without them. So huge shout out and thank you to our planning committee members this year. All right, with that, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping and a quick look back and look ahead at our day today. So first, the housekeeping. As a reminder, at the top of your schedule every day, you can see a link to the tech help room. Someone is going to be in that room during the entire convening. So if you get lost or have any technical issues, go ahead and click on the link to the tech help room. That'll take you to a Zoom room where you'll have someone be able to walk you through any issues that you might have and resolve that. You can also email inventedhelp@gmail.com and we'll get you whatever assistance you might need. Now I want to take a look back for those who weren't able to join us yesterday on some of what we covered. We because this really informs the conversation that we're going to have today. So yesterday, we spent some time together looking back at the progress that the network has made over the last year, and I'm excited that we're going to have the chance to do that again today. We took a really deep dive into the questions around racial equity and inclusion and how equity issues show up in our work through Invention Education. We were joined by Dr. Ebony McGee for that conversation, and she really challenged us to look deeply at the structures that reinforce bias in the work that we do and to actively work to resolve those issues. I wanted to give a special shout out to a couple of folks who had posted additional comments in the session chat for that one, with reminders that from Megan Onstrass, that in addition to race, we should also be really thinking about anyone who is different or isn't expected to do as well, also has to work much harder. And Megan called out specifically people with disabilities in that comment, and I thought that was a really great reminder. Clara Marber noted also the challenges of language, and I think especially as we saw with our young inventor yesterday, as a recent immigrant to the country and an English language learner, those are the kinds of barriers that are so critical to think about when we're looking at issues of bias and inclusivity in the invention education work that we do. InventEd Inspire folks, just so you know, after you left yesterday, we had the chance to do some deeper work on the equity piece to look at how that shows up in our daily work and how we as a network might be able to address some of those challenges together. And we ended the day with 5 fantastic breakouts. Again, huge thanks to everyone for leading those sessions yesterday. Today in our agenda, we're going to bring those sessions and that equity lens with us as we look ahead to the short and long-term future of invention education. We're going to have the opportunity to hear from our network members, and then we're extremely excited to be joined by Dr. Marion Croak in a fireside chat moderated by Dr. Dorothy Jones Davis. I already saw some excitement about that session in the session chat this morning, so we really cannot wait to bring that to you very shortly. Before we move on to the sessions, I just want to remind us again that this is an interactive program and we are so eager to hear your voices. So I'd love to just invite you, before I hand over to Erin Toshin, who's going to take us into our content, if you have one big question or idea that you left the session with yesterday, or a question or idea that you hope that you'll hear the answers to today, please go ahead and drop that into the session chat, and we'll be keeping our eye on that over the course of the program and try to address those questions as we go. Thanks again to all of you. I am going to go ahead and hand it to Erin to take us into the content.
Thanks, Corey. I am definitely looking forward to jumping in today, and I'm sure everyone else is too, so I will keep my comments brief. As Corey mentioned a little bit earlier, I just came from a great session with our Inspire attendees, diving a little bit deeper into what invention education is, its impact, and how to get involved in the InventEd network. And so it's so great to see this network growing. If you happen to miss it this morning, no worries. We have a recording and we'll be sharing that out. So we have a lot on our plate today to begin digging deeper into identifying network priorities for 2021, centered on 4 pillars: educator engagement, communication and advocacy, pedagogy and curriculum, and research and assessment. And I'll be sharing much more about that a little later on this afternoon. So before we get started with Dr. Croak, I'd like to ground the conversation with a quick example of why we do the work we do, with a video from a young inventor, and I promise this will make your day, and some updates from our network members. Sophia is a 3rd grader in a STEM Innovation Entrepreneurship class developed and taught by Catherine Owens. Hi to Catherine, if you are joining us this morning. Catherine is an elementary through middle school teacher at Washington Episcopal School in the DC area. Sophia has recorded a video sharing her story as an inventor. Let's watch.
Hi, my name is Sophia, and I'm an inventor. In school, I've enjoyed the chance to develop inventions that solve problems and even have their own logos. It's sometimes hard, but very fun to combine what I learned in STEM with my creativity to create my own invention ideas. For example, last year, my class made biomimicry-inspired inventions. Those are inventions that copy some adaptations found in nature I made a turtleback umbrella. Here's the logo. That has special protection from weather, including hail, sleet, and wind. It mimics from the protective shell adaptation of a turtle. Turtleback umbrellas has added protection from bad weather. Just like turtle shells provide shelter, and protection to turtles. I learned a lot of problem solving along the way too. Also, in class, we explore adventures and their inventions related to STEM, and it really inspires me to keep thinking. I really enjoy inventing, and I hope one day I can make an invention that pops up on a store shelf near you.
Thank you, Sophia. Wow, yeah, I think Erin said it. This video made my day. I know we don't get to see this in action so often, and it just gives me energy for why we do the work. For those of you who are just joining today, I'm David Coronado with the Lemelson Foundation. I think I was talking earlier to your Inspire guests, and we were talking about the power of invention is that youth get to solve problems that they care about, and that no one's saying this is what you need to do, and this is where we're going to really get them connected to their passion, their interest, and their future. So it's been wonderful to meet some of our attendees, including the Inspire we just had in our chat session. If I haven't had a chance to speak with you so far, I hope you'll find me in the community section and send me a chat. I would love to connect with you during the convening. I will say that from the beginning, that people and passion are what fuel this network. We work for the Sophias of the world whose talent and creativity are waiting really to be nurtured. I encourage you to reach out to someone who you have not met in the community section. There are so many great people here, including those in the videos we're about to see. I hope you just don't get to sit back and listen, but I hope you'll engage with those in the room because they bring so many different perspectives from engaging invention in the arts and culture, from STEM to technology, you name it, but it's all around problem solving and really empowering youth to have agency in their lives. So first, I would love to kick off some videos here showcasing the transformative and potential for invention education in the classroom and the important roles that educators take. I just want to take a quick second to really thank all the educators who are out there. As Doug Scott said in chat, hashtag this year is crazy in school. I think that's an understatement. You're working day and night, weekends. I know I see my teacher dinging on Google Classroom late hours of the night working. You are teaching conditions we could never have imagined. And I just want to make sure we all say thank you for doing that. And thank you for being here, because I know that you're talking to students and going in and out of classes today. The other set of videos that we're going to show are developed by our members to give us a look at what they have been up to this year. We're going to hear from 3 cross-network teams who over the last year have developed new resources and programs centered around teaching and learning. The first is a partnership between a local public school and a national invention museum. The second, an activity book that will help educators and family introduce invention to very young students and engaging in an artistic way. And third, a framework to connect invention and sustainable chemistry for impact. As you watch, I hope you'll use the session chat on the right to share your ideas about connecting with others you have not met, or add support for these teams because they are doing things that we want them to do, which is we want folks collaborating, connecting, and problem solving. Invention isn't what happens in the classroom. It happens right here in this network too. So with further ado, let's see the network in action and go ahead and roll the footage.
Invention probably, gosh, if you had brought up the word a while back, somebody might have just said, oh, we don't do that.
I never understood what invention really actually meant until you see it happening right in front of you.
It's not teaching them how to solve one problem, it's teaching them the tools so that they can analyze, know what to do, and apply it to anything.
It gives students a chance to explore the world around them from outside of a textbook. And that's really important because we know that not all students learn the same way.
I think that this allows teachers to become less driven by content and more about process. They can really liberate themselves from knowing all the facts and being the sage on the stage to being one of a facilitator.
One of the fundamental interesting things about invention education is that students are going along on a journey with their teacher. They're both learning, they're both making mistakes.
We provide teachers the tools to engage in their content in a totally different way. We know that this isn't going to happen overnight for teachers, and so we work with partners and programs who develop curricula, as well as provide technical assistance and professional development to teachers around the country to really help them become the leaders in their school.
My teaching was transformed completely.
It lends back creativity. For me, it breathed life back into my practice.
I want to equip my students for those jobs of the future that I don't know what they are, but I need them to have the skills to adapt and to change.
Regardless of what career path that young people choose, invention education really does provide that framework for them as a life learning skill.
My name is Erica Barnes, and I'm currently a junior at the University of Pittsburgh studying urban studies and planning. I'm also the assistant editor-in-chief of Forbes and Fifth, the undergraduate research journal for our School of Arts and Sciences. My time at STEM gave me the confidence to be a leader and the ability to effectively work as a team. It also introduced me to my 5 lifelong best friends.
Hi, I'm Elena Rutledge, National Inventors Hall of Fame VP of Research and Design. Our founding partnership with the United States Patent and Trademark Office gave us the framework to build meaningful relationships that support invention education. Over the years, the National Inventors Hall of Fame has been able to reach and inspire educators and students with the help of so many amazing partners. Over a decade ago, we created a partnership between Akron Public Schools, the City of Akron, and the University of Akron with a dream to open a public invention school. We had a collective mission to deeply impact students and empower them with innovation tools. Museum offices and exhibit spaces were transformed into learning labs. The school's approach was so successful that within 5 years, a second invention school was launched, the National Inventors Hall of Fame STEM High School. Our invention schools have over a decade of knowledge on how to traverse public and private sector partnerships. The schools are recognized as leaders in invention education. They focus on PBL instruction, and they collaborate with community-wide partners, as well as prolific inventors and VIPs from the USPTO. The National Inventors Hall of Fame's recent partnership with the Lemelson Foundation and Dr. Joanna Garner from Old Dominion University enabled us to research girls' identity in invention education. We found that girls' identity around STEM is mostly separate from their identity as an inventive person. We are committed to deeper research around these findings so that we can create equitable experiences that will empower all students to solve challenges like the ones we are facing today and the ones that we will face tomorrow.
Hi, my name is Cameron Budley. I am an alumni of both STEM Middle School and High School. I am currently at Muskingum University and I am studying engineering. Here on campus, I am the president of Black Student Union, while I am also a student athlete on the softball team. I'm a part of Social Greek Life and I work on admissions projects for the university, just to name a few things. My time at STEM really equipped me with many skills I use every day, and it provided me with many opportunities to become comfortable in leadership positions I hold.
We'd like to challenge all of you to continue to cultivate partnerships because together, we can equip all children with the power of invention.
a leaf cutter bee house. These are the tubes where the leaf cutter bees can go and rest. Bye!
Hi, my name is Kate Anderson, and I'm Director of K-12 Education for Beyond Benign.
Hi, I'm Emily Hostetler from the Museum of Science in Boston.
Beyond Benign teamed up with the Museum of Science Boston to collaborate on a project to increase awareness of invention education to chemistry outreach educators, including those that reach underrepresented student communities, as a tool to impact key student learning goals, such as increasing interest, relevance, and self-efficacy in chemistry as identified in the Chem Attitudes Framework, and explore the synergies of the Invention Education and Chem Attitudes Framework and share the findings with both chemistry and invention education communities.
Our work with the Chem Attitudes Project presented an exciting opportunity to not only test how to facilitate an online workshop, but to learn how our chemistry framework could be integrated with other frameworks to support positive learning experiences.
By weaving together the Chem Attitudes Framework and the Invention Education Frameworks, our aim is to help people understand how and why chemistry skills and invention tools through the lens of green chemistry are so critical to developing problem solvers, informed consumers, leaders, and innovators.
The most impactful parts of the project were facilitating an online workshop for museum education staff and building new connections to underrepresented chemistry and invention ed communities. We recently compiled these experiences in a case study to highlight what we learned with all of you.
We hope that you will share your knowledge and expertise with us as we work to expand and share this resource with a broader chemistry education community. We encourage you to review the resources shared in the Google folder and share your ideas, opinions on how you can use these tools to engage your audiences. Thank you.
I want to give a huge thank you to Alina Rutledge, Doug Scott, Kate Anderson, and their teams for sharing these stories with us. You've shared some big ideas, and I know there's going to be a lot of questions and areas follow-up. Please reach out to the Spotlight leads in the community section of Attend to Find, connect directly with them. If you missed them in the video, maybe our folks here who are behind the scenes can put their names in the chat so you can find them. I'm loving the chat. Also, there's a lot of great problems that people are putting out there. Megan Anstos posing a question in the network around how to include invention education in federal state required curriculum. Keep the conversation going. So we have another section here, which I'm excited as we move into our keynote and fireside chat with Dr. Koch. Over the years, I know we've talked a lot about the importance of supporting inventors at all points along the pathway to invention. I know we're honored to have the opportunity to hear from Dr. Koch, who in her groundbreaking work has helped to clear a pathway for future inventors and has pioneered work in advancing critical technologies we rely on. I'm also delighted to share that we will have 3 special guests who are early on in their own invention journeys to help us with this session. First is Leslie Rojas Calcoa, a 12th grade student inventor from Oregon, a wonderful student who I had a chance to meet a couple years ago, and she's going to kick us off. We have 2 other young inventors who will join us with the question and answers later with Dr. Koch. Leslie, it's great to see you again. Thank you for joining us. I would love for you to share your story and your path to becoming an inventor with us. Thank you, Leslie. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. As David said, and I am a senior at McKay High School in Salem, Oregon. And it might seem a little extreme, but I found my passion for engineering in 7th grade. I joined an after-school engineering club with my best friend, and happened as I stepped in. I didn't know my life would be changed forever. We continued on this engineering club, and I had no idea, no prior experience of it. However, as we continued on, we came across the Human-Centered Design Challenge. And through this challenge, we were tasked to build a prosthetic arm for individuals in need of it. And here was where my spark began. I saw that I could do something for an individual in need of it. I could actually make a change. And as I saw this, we continued on. I failed a lot through my prototyping time. And as I continued on, I got to experience electronics and engineering and the innovation and invention space. I continued on, and going on to high school, I saw a group of students who looked like me. They were children of immigrants. They were first-generation students. And not only were they sweeping high school competitions, but also college ones. Continue and thrive in these competitions, I saw myself think, well, if they can do it, so can I. So we continued on, I continued on this pathway. My sophomore year, I got the opportunity to go on to construct a adaptive cup for individuals with dysphagia with my team on this year-long project. And at the end, I got to visit my dream school all across the country. And it was just an overall amazing experience. And all of these experiences all came from that one time where I stepped into that science classroom with my best friend in 7th grade. And my hope for the future of invention and for innovation is to have more people who look like me, to inspire those little Leslies in 7th grade, to inspire those young girls who are looking into invention education. And I'm super excited I'm so thankful for this opportunity, and thank you so much for letting me hear my story.
Thank you, Leslie, so much for sharing your story. It's so powerful to hear from you. I know it's not easy to speak to a camera here. Leslie, I mean, you raised some important points because the pathway to inventing looks different for every student, but if we don't give students role models and examples that look like them or who are like them, whether that's of diversity, from ethnicity to race to abilities, you name it, we really need to make sure we're providing our young people examples they can aspire to, and to make it feel like they're superstars, these role models, but really those that are come from places like them and have a shared experience. So it's something we definitely need to bring to our conversation. I think it's important to also remember that invention education is an opportunity to really help unlock youth's potential to really think around inventing and to really formulate an identity as an inventor, but also as a problem solver and a change agent. And Leslie, muchas gracias for sharing your story, because I do think that you are definitely on your way, and we're really excited around what you're going to bring in the future. So I look forward to hearing more about how our keynote, Dr. Croak, found her way invention pathways, as we just heard from Leslie's. And I'll turn it over to our moderator and Dr. Dorothy Jones Davis, Executive Director of Nation of Makers, to introduce our keynote. It's always a pleasure to have you be a part of our network, Dorothy.
Thank you for having me, David, and thank you for that introduction. Leslie, you're so remarkable, and I cannot wait to follow your journey. It is my honor to be here today with Dr. Marian Croak. Dr. Marian Croak is the Vice President of Site Reliability Engineering for Ads, Corporate Engineering, and YouTube at Google. Marian joined Google in late 2014 after retiring from AT&T as a Senior Vice President responsible for advanced research and innovation and designing and developing one of the world's largest wireless and broadband networks. She managed over 2,000 world-class engineers and computer scientists. Dr. Croak holds over 200 patents, mostly focused on IP technology, including over 100 focused on voice over IP, of which she was a developer of. Dr. Croak has received numerous awards, including, the 2013 and 2014 Edison Patent Awards. She was inducted into the Women in Technology International's Hall of Fame in 2013. She is, of course, a strong supporter of STEM initiatives. She served on many boards, including NACME and Catalyst, and personally mentors many individuals in STEM. And I don't know how you have time to do that, Dr. Croak, with this CV. Dr. Croak attended Princeton University and the University of Southern California, where she received her doctorate in quantitative analysis. She is currently a member of the Corporate Advisory Board for the University of Southern California, and it is my distinct honor to join her today and just talk to her about her journey. Before we get started, Dr. Crook, I do want to remind folks that you can submit your questions through the chat. We will be monitoring them and moderating them, and then we'll be able to answer them at the end. But before we do that, I'd like to start with just a conversation with you a little bit about your pathways. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this.
Oh, so have I. I'm very excited. In 2012, you reflected on your early passions in an open letter to women in technology. And I'm going to read an excerpt of it to share with our community. You said, "It was 1960, and I can still trace the phone call like the back of my hand. It was an ordinary day. I remember something broke at home, and my mother called my father at work, instructing him to come home and help fix it. Doesn't matter what the problem was now, but at the age of 5, I knew I wanted to be the one she'd run to when something needed repair. I'd make sure nothing would break, and if it did, I surely would know how to make it work again. Whether I was an imagined plumber, electrician, or carpenter, it didn't matter. I envied that men could go out and work." So I have a question for you, which is, when did you realize that aspiration that you too could make science and technology and ultimately invention your job? Who inspired you as you went down your career path?
It's so funny that you cited that that image that I still have in my mind. And just last week, another plumber had to come into my house, and I was again fascinated by the way that he worked. And you know, we think of plumbing as like a mundane thing, but it's really an art and it's a science. Like, you know, this person that came to the house, he had a hypothesis about what was wrong, and he kept testing it, and it was invisible because it's all piping behind walls, but he kept, you know, testing his ideas, and then he finally was able to not just fix something, but actually solve a deep problem. And I think I've always been attracted to something that is big and major and can be life impacting, but, you know, it's challenging and that you can solve it. And so it's not as if I looked at a career and said, I want to do this or that, but I was always attracted to something that needed to be fixed. And the more challenging it was, the more attractive I was, you know, to it. And so I think I tried to follow a career that had that element at its core. And it wasn't a specific discipline or profession, but it just had to have that type of challenge. And I had to feel like I would be able to fix it.
I love that. I love that idea of finding a problem. And I think so many folks are drawn to invention and engineering because of that, right? It's a tangible thing. Like, I see a problem and I can solve it. And that agency is tremendous. So tell us about your journey. I mean, you talked about this time, and you obviously were a small child, and, you know, you have had this, you know, illustrious career. You know, take us through a little bit of that journey. Like, how did you get from those early days to where you're at now, from a girl just looking at her dad with this wonder of, you know, how can I fix these problems in my house, to someone who's just had such an incredible career?
I think I first really got stimulated in that direction in high school. I went to a public high school in New York City, and they had great math and science teachers. And that kind of lit a fire under me. They made it fun, you know, they made it enjoyable. And then when I went to college, I got interested in statistics. And again, I had professors that allowed me to see that you could actually use statistics in your everyday life to solve problems and to feel confident in the decisions that you were making. Statistics are all about probability and how accurate something could be. So I love the fact that you could apply that to everyday life. And then, so I went on to grad school, and I started to major in quantitative analysis, but I also liked the social sciences. So I combined that with a degree in social psychology as well. And I didn't know, I didn't know at all where I was going to go with this and what career I could have. I was very open to many possibilities. And then Bell Labs actually came to USC. And Bell Labs at the time was the research arm of AT&T. And it was very esteemed, sort of like what we think of Google or Apple today. Like it was a palace of science. And so I went into Bell Labs, and again, I was attracted to problems that were really big and that most people were afraid to go near. But somehow I would always kind of want to go there. And so, so many of the inventions that I have are around voice communication and the way that we can communicate using the internet like we're doing right now in order to talk to each other. And at the time that I got involved in that at AT&T, the internet was just coming into realization and to normal use. And people definitely didn't believe that you could send a voice call or have voice communication over the internet. And we were going to invest in very expensive proprietary technology to replace some of the aging components in the core network. And I was thinking, there's got to be a better way. And so I got attracted to that, and I did a lot of research in it, and it led to that. And after I finished that career, which was a very long one, like it spanned 30 years, I came to Google, and I've been delighted in Google because, it's a wonderful company. It's got huge reach across the world, supporting billions of users, and it's trying to solve some of the world's most difficult problems. So it's like, that's right up my alley.
So you never run out of problems to solve at Google. So that's good to know. And I'm just really struck by, honestly, we would not be here today and able to hold this conference in the midst of a pandemic if it had not been for some of the innovations that you brought to light. So thank you for that, for allowing us to be here today. We really do appreciate that. So I want to turn a little bit to thinking about your process as an inventor. We have a lot of folks that are, lots of youth that are joining us that are thinking about being an inventor at the beginning of their path there, as we heard from Leslie. So my question is, once you have a problem that requires a new invention that you have identified, how do you approach that problem? What steps do you take to generate and test some new inventive ideas that you have? So the spark goes off, then what do you do?
Yeah, so, I think it's important to be skeptical, to once you find something that you think is going to solve a problem, be suspicious of it, like keep testing it and seeing, is this really going to work? And keep asking yourself, how can you prove that to yourself? And then once you gain confidence in it, like what I've always done is I try to find someone else who believes in it and someone who can help me bring that to realization. I also think it's really important that you listen to critics. You're going to have lots of critics because when you try to change something, a lot of people don't like that, and they want things to stay the same. So many times in my life when I've done new things, lots and lots of criticism comes with that. And, you want to run away from it because it can be painful, it can be humiliating, it can hurt. But it's also important for you to hear what people are saying who don't really believe in what you're doing and to be able to address those. They usually have some element of truth in what they're saying, and you have to try to make sure that your invention is overcoming the obstacles that they're pointing out. So that's super important to do. And then after that, after you find people that believe in you and can support you, and you've taken in all the criticism and you've addressed it, then I think it's just like persevering and holding steady, because it usually will take a long, long time. But then once it happens, it's great. So that would be my journey. That's what my journey is. The thing I would also say is in the early stages, where you're kind of being skeptical, do a lot of homework, like really find out all the information that you're going to need to make your innovation or your invention solid. You know, don't just think I'm passionate and I care more about this than anyone else, so that means it's going to work and it's true, and just keep going. It's always good to try to do as much homework and remain skeptical until you can really have a very solid foundation for what you're going to do.
I love that, a healthy dose of skepticism about your own work. And I think, you know, it is important. You know, a lot of times we talk about the engineering cycle or the design cycle and having that iteration, but often we don't talk about getting external opinions, right? And the value of those external opinions. And I think your biggest critics can be the people that motivate you the most and help you to get to that next level. So I think that's really incredible and important advice to have and to listen to. So throughout your career, I know you have been frequently one of the few women, and certainly one of the few women of color in your work. Who were the people or what were the things that helped you keep an eye on your path and keep motivated and supported, even in environments where you may seem like the lonely only, as people say?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it started with my father. You know, like my father was just like my hero in a way, and I don't know why. I mean, he was just a common guy, but he was very he valued education a lot, and he was very interested in my education and very interested in trying to stimulate me to move into the sciences. He built me a chemistry set, or he had one built for me. He was very tolerant. And my mother was also very encouraging, but to have my father's support, you know, and he died when I was, I guess, you know, in my late 20s, early 30s. So he was with me all through my educational journey. And then once I started working as well. And he was always giving me advice. You know, I wasn't like the perfect child. I was kind of on the, like a little on the wild side, not crazy wild, but just like always wanting to do my own thing, not really wanting to, you know, succumb myself to discipline always. So he would always be there encouraging me to just keep going and give it a try, you know, and try to conform as much as possible. So he was a real hero. And then, you know, I also was a reader. I liked reading a lot, and even people sometimes that I would read about in fiction or you know, in history that had overcome difficult things in their lives, and still they were able to transcend obstacles. I was inspired by them. So it was lonely in the sense that there was no one else. Like, that was my best friend that was walking along this journey with me. But there were both, you know, people on the outside, like my father, and then even fictional people that I kind of modeled after.
I can totally relate to that. I was also a daddy's girl, and my dad very much had an influence on me becoming a scientist. So I definitely think there is a value to parents and caregivers and just people in your life, right, that see something about you and are willing to continue to support you and encourage you to think beyond. And so there's definitely a role there. Early in your career, or even throughout your career, not just early on, I'm sure that at some point you faced roadblocks. And, you know, I want to ask you for sort of advice. So what did you do to kind of get past those roadblocks in your career? And what advice would you give to others? You know, if there's an inventor facing a roadblock that's listening to us now, you know, what might you give him or her as advice to move forward?
Yeah, so, you know, I'm still facing those roadblocks, believe it or not. And I have since day one. And I guess to put it in its place, you know, to realize, and it's usually through people, right? There's always like some character that's going to try and stop you or be unkind or a critic. but try to realize that that may be just a small set of the population base that you're exposed to. I remember once I called my mother when I was in grad school, and I was very upset about a certain professor that had said something. And she was great because she said, that's just a small person. You know, why are you getting so upset over that person? But in my mind, he was huge. You know, it was huge. It was like, well, he was supposed to be this and that, and he was so esteemed. But she sized him down to some like mosquito, right? And it was like very helpful for me to see it in that context, because it's usually the case that you're like magnifying someone's power and thinking that, you know, because they've hurt you, that they take up more of the world than they really should. So, you know, kind of hoping that you can keep a perspective on things is very helpful, and that, you know, that you can balance out the one or two critics that you may have, or the people that are, you know, laying some trap down for you or some obstacle. You can realize that that's a small part of the world that you're in. So I think that helps a lot.
That is you have such a great perspective on life. I was just thinking, man, I know you're a very busy woman, but I really, really appreciate all of that, the advice that you've given today. I think it really does help to sort of change your perspective and really think. And I really like that idea of, you know, sometimes you have someone that's saying something to you and you're making them bigger than they are. And they have a utility, right, in helping you, but that they're not everything. And I think that's really important for people to keep in mind. So I want to shift a little bit to the whole field of invention. You know, looking at the field, you know, where have you seen the greatest change? And conversely, you know, where do you think change is needed? What do you think that the future of invention looks like? You know, at Invent Ed, we often talk about, you know, inventing an equitable future, which is obviously the theme, and looking forward to the future of invention. What do you think that holds?
Yeah, so, you know, the greatest thing and the biggest change that I've seen is the access that most people are fortunate enough to have to information now. You know, and that's due a lot to the internet and technology companies that have helped to bring the internet to people. And you can do so much research and you have so much information online. You can also reach out to so many people that have expertise and, you know, communicate with them in ways that we couldn't before. So you have this great base of information now to help you formulate new ideas and understand kind of the limitations of things. That's been both a blessing and a curse, because sometimes you tend to think, well, all of this information exists, all of these innovations and apps are already here, and there's nothing I can think of that's going to be different. And sometimes that could be a bit overwhelming and stifling. But I think if you keep this mindset that all of this was made by humans, right? And 10 years ago, none of it existed. And probably 20 years from now, we'll be laughing at how primitive it all is. So that new things are needed, and to just stay motivated to realize improvements, even though this has been spectacular, improvements are always needed and necessary.
I love that improvements are always, it's true. You can always improve upon, and that's what we want from the next generation. We always hope that the next generation is even better than the last. And looking back, we have steadily made improvements. I mean, as you said, no one would even imagine that we'd be holding conversations like this regularly just 10 years ago even, right? So I think that it's pretty remarkable to think about how far we've come. So I'm going to ask you, you know, as my final question before I go over to our wonderful youth innovators and inventors on the line. They're very eager to ask some questions, so I don't want to take up too much time. But I have a question for you, for us as sort of the invention education community. And I want to know, you know, what do you think, what advice would you give us on how educators and organizations like Lemelson, like Nation of Makers, like the many organizations that are represented here today can better inspire and support first-time inventors? What can we do to kind of help keep that spark going, to be part of that supportive community like you shared that your dad was and other individuals in your life? What can we do?
You know, I think the most important thing is to encourage inventors, especially young inventors, to go against the status quo. And I know that that can be sometimes difficult because you want order, you want, peace and conformity. But to get children and students to think that the way things are does not have to be the way that they will continue to be, and that change is needed, and that things can change, and that they should change, and that we're not yet in a state of nirvana. We're not yet in a state where there's full equality and equity. We're not in a state where everyone has access to information that they need and technology that they need, and even that the technology that we do have, it's nowhere near perfect. And so to realize that they can change the world and they can reshape it, and that it needs to be reshaped. And so I think it's really important that students and all of us get exposed to any stimulation that can cause us to ask why something is the way it is. And does it need to be that way? And is there a better way of doing something? And then secondly, I would say things that we can do to encourage our own creativity is very important, because when you're inventing something, you're thinking out of the box. You have to think of something new that's never been thought of before. And in order to do that, you have to expand kind of your consciousness and your awareness of things. So even being exposed to a new language or a new culture or some art form, a poetry that you haven't been exposed to before, or art is extremely important. I think just to let your mind kind of ease up all the restrictions that it has inside of it.
I love that. I love that integration of, also the arts. I think you're absolutely right. In order for your mind to think about these very highly technical subjects, sometimes you need to free it, right? To think differently, to see, and to be inspired, right? There still is a muse process, even though you might not be writing, you might be doing something that might be more technical and making technical calculations. There still is that value to having that sort of muse of art and beauty and music and language. That's really key. So I'm excited. I don't want to take up so much time because we have two wonderful youth inventors that are joining us. So we have Oscar Rojas Coloca, who is a 9th grader from the state of Oregon, and Ariana Anderson, who is a 9th grader from the state of Connecticut, which is my home state. So shout out to Connecticut there. But they both are joining us today to ask you some questions, Dr. Croak. So I'm going to call on Oscar first. And Oscar also is, you may notice, a similar last name. He is related to the wonderful Leslie. So this family has 2 inventors, at least, in their house. So it's pretty exciting. So Oscar, do you want to go ahead and ask Dr. Croak your 2 questions? Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. My name is Oscar Rojas. I am a freshman at McKay High School in Salem, Oregon. Honestly, I would have not been able to be here if it wasn't for my sister Leslie, who you met at the beginning of the presentation today. She's just an amazing person, and her passion for engineering made it so that I want to be an inventor just like her. Even though I'm new to this invention path, I have joined some after-school club, and I'm trying to get into some engineering classes. Dr. Croak, when you were in school, did your plans ever change of becoming an inventor? And what advice do you have for people like me who are starting our own engineering path? Thank you.
Oh, that's a great question. I may not be your typical inventor because I certainly zigzagged around. I never had a goal of being an inventor. I may not have even realized what that meant at all, but I knew that I wanted to fix things and I wanted to change things. And so that desire led to invention. But, throughout my my educational journey. Sometimes I wanted to be a doctor. Sometimes I wanted to be a nursery school teacher. Sometimes I wanted to be a clinical psychologist. So I was all over the place. And I didn't really kind of follow a direct path until I actually started working. And that was at Bell Labs. And then I just found engineering to be so fascinating. I stayed with that. And even now you can see I went from like network engineering and telecommunications, and now I'm into software engineering and understanding more sophisticated things like AI algorithms and like taking on things that maybe 5 years ago didn't even exist, but they do now. So like if you have an open mind and you kind of understand what makes you tick, and by that, like for me, it was like solving big, complicated problems, you can almost go anywhere you want, but just make sure that you satisfy that core desire in yourself, if that makes sense, I hope.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for asking that great question.
Thank you. So next we have Ariana Anderson again from Connecticut. Ariana, are you ready to ask your questions of Dr. Krogh?
Yes, thank you so much. Hi, I'm Ariana. I'm a 9th grader who attends Pathways Academy in Connecticut. My favorite subjects are math and science, and I love inventing. I began inventing in 6th grade when I entered into my local invention fair, and from that point on, I've just fell in love with the ideation process. Currently, I'm in robotics where I continue to invent and pursue my dream. Dr. Krogh, my questions for you are, how did you balance your work life or inventing life with your personal life, and did it ever interfere? And my second question is, what advice do you have for aspiring brown girls who want to get into tech, which is a male-dominated field? Thank you.
Oh, thanks for those questions. So to answer the first one, I'll answer the first one. I have 3 amazing children. They're adults now, but I have 3 of them, and they were all born within 36 months of each other. So they were very close, and just once you go over one child, you have to pay a lot of attention to 2 or 3. And so they took up most of my life for, I guess, I'd say a good 18 to 20 years. And I had to figure out a way. I always enjoyed working. I always enjoyed invention and solving things. And I had to figure out a way where my personal life was going to become integrated with my professional life. And so I would just tell them what I was doing. I would tell them, I really like to think of new ways of doing things. Why don't you guys help me with some inventions? And I would get them, this was after they could talk, right? So like 5, 6 on up, like they would have to start inventing new things as well. And so they came up with some great concepts, and some that are even true, came into real being, not through them, but over time. And they would do things like flying sneakers. They built like this plastic device to protect your telephone in case you like dumped it in the toilet or something like that. They would come up with all these things, but it would be inspiring to me, and it would be joyful to me, and it helped them to understand. Sometimes my mind would be off, and it's like, what are you thinking about? And so I would say, well, I'm thinking about, how to make this happen or that happen, or make it so this doesn't happen again. And then they would get into it as well. So like, if you can share your professional life with your family, I think that helps a lot. I used to be a runner. Now I'm a walker, but I used to love running. And sometimes while I was running, I would be thinking of inventions as well. But I think it's very important. Like people say balance, to have a balanced life. I would say have an integrated life. Like, you know, it's sometimes people think of balancing as you either do this or that at certain times of the day, but if you can do it all kind of together, it, for me anyway, that felt better. So my kids came out, they're fine now, you know, and I think it worked. I think it worked well. So now remind me of your second question. Oh, about brown girls, right? Yeah, so, you know, what you're gonna have to do, I think, is get your own like social network and support system. And sometimes you won't be able to do that at work because it just won't exist. I'm fortunate, you know, to be at Google right now, and I've built up a good network of other people of color, mostly women, but also men that I can talk to and we can share ideas with, and they're there, right? And that's important. And sometimes you'll be able to find that in your profession. Sometimes it will have to be outside of that, in your church, in your family, you know, in some connection that you've made, some social club or something. But find it, because you're going to need it, right? You're going to need that support. And then just what I would say is what I've always tried to do is find like some way that I could connect to people, no matter what their, you know, ethnicity is or their politics, but find some element that I have in common with them to just make, you know, to make the human connection. And then when you really get deeply involved in your work, you kind of lose your sense of like your physical being or your political being. You just become partners working on something together. And that's a great state to get to. So I'm hoping that you'll be able to find that.
Thank you.
That's a state of flow. Thank you so much, Ariana, for that great question, those series of great questions. I personally feel like I learned a lot in this session. So you have inspired me. I know you were here to inspire the youth, but you did inspire me, and I'm very grateful for it. And Vic just commented, is anyone else kind of speechless right now? I mean, even internally. And I think we all feel the same way hearing your story, Dr. Croak. So I'm so grateful for you being here today. We do have some more audience questions coming in. So if you'll humor me, I'll ask you some of those. Clara in our audience asked, you talked about the need to research problems and ideas. Should inventors seek to become experts in one particular field? What impact do generalists have in the realm of inventing?
Yeah, I'm a hero, and I'm always applauding generalists. Now, definitely going deep into something has its place, and you'll be able to really achieve a lot in that one field. But I find that sometimes if you come into something and you don't really know that much about it, you know enough about it to be able to, you know, understand it and what may be lacking in it. Sometimes I find like people who have enough knowledge but are totally enmeshed in something, that they can make the greatest contributions, because, you know, they're not part of the club, so to speak. Like, you don't really are a true believer in something. You're looking at it with fresh eyes, with a new perspective, you know, and you can bring other disciplines into it as well. And I'm all for generalists. I really am. I think, you know, that's the path that I've kind of gone down, is like just learning new things as life goes on. You know, finding some interest that I would want to go deep in, but also lots of others. Like, you know, I'm an engineer, but I do have a degree in social psychology, and that's been great. That's been really super helpful. So I would applaud being a generalist.
Well, you've convinced me. I definitely think that that's the way to go. You know, as you said, it definitely helps you to have different perspectives and get all of those, you know, sort of different ideas. And I can only imagine, as a social psychologist, like how exciting it is and how useful it is actually to have that skill set at a place like Google, when you're dealing with some of these algorithms that may make changes, right? And in sort of ways that we look at things, how we experience things, what our own psychology is. So it's got to be really rewarding to have that bit of expertise in that particular area.
Yeah, and also to have it balanced with like the quantitative side as well.
Yeah.
You know, so like you can do both, which is great. Like, and you can go back and forth in your thinking. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm team generalist now too. So Ethan asks a question, which is, he says, I would love to hear more about your opinion of Google's next billion users, which is NBU, which I actually don't know anything about. So I'm looking forward to this. He asked, did your experiences developing products for India shed insights to or for that group? And what insights can the invention education, he asks a little bit more, what insights can the invention education community gain from how to design for the margin to improve our core invention offering? And then he also says, thank you for your pioneering work in making texting to donate a way to engage the public during crises, which was very, very important in this crisis. So just another way that you've helped.
You know, I really like his question. When I was working, first of all, the Next Billion User is both an organization within Google, but it's also an initiative to a suite of programs that Google has in looking at emerging markets and trying to understand, you know, across the globe, what are some of the needs that new users to the internet have, you know, and making sure that the products and services that Google provides are in the languages and understand the culture of, you know, the billions of people that will be using these products for the first time and the services for the first time. So that was a fascinating experience that I had working in that area. I went on to do other things, but it was very enjoyable. And one of the major things that we did in India, and this was, believe it or not, it was just like maybe 6 years ago, where we were bringing Wi-Fi, public Wi-Fi to India for the first time. Now that country has advanced in amazing ways in the last 6 years. So it feels almost like 60 years ago, you know, in terms of the advancements that have been made in technology and the ubiquity of it for those populations and those different, you know, all the different topologies and climates that there are in India, and then having to figure out how to configure Wi-Fi, public Wi-Fi and outdoor stations for the variation there. But it was enormous. It was a great experience, and it's important. And I think when you try to design things for the margins, you often find that it's very beneficial for everyone. So you may start out thinking that you're in a niche. You know, it's almost like the discipline of what we call accessibility, where you're designing things for people that may have a certain handicap or disability, but then you realize, well, you're making it easier for this small subset, but everyone needs that same sense of ease. And, you know, it can be very, very beneficial, both from a business point of view, but also just the utility of what you're doing. So you think you're designing for the margins, but you're really bringing everyone along.
That is so true. That is so very true. And I think that perspective, again, you have such a keen perspective, and I think it's really, really important. So you said that you really enjoy reading. And I think one of the last question I want to ask you today is, what's on your reading list? Are there any recommendations you have? What have you been reading lately that you would like to share with us?
One book that I've really liked recently is called Caste, C-A-S-T-E, and it's by a Pulitzer Prize winner journalist, and she just writes about the parallels between what's going on in America in terms of inequity and what went on in Germany and what has gone on in India. So that was very informative. There's a book that I read ever so often, and it's had a profound influence on my thinking, and it's called The Innovator's Dilemma. That's a great book. That's a great book. And I think anyone who's interested in invention should read that. There's a book also that I read and that I just finished reading for like the 5th time called Originals by Adam Grant. And he's also a author that believes very strongly in the need for more innovation and imagination in the world. And he has written a lot on how to stimulate that. So that's a good book. I can go on and on. I read like 5 or 6 books at the same time.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
And also occasionally I'll just, just sit and watch like binge on Netflix too. So
okay, so what's your Netflix pick? We just want to know just one Netflix pick. What's the one that you're watching?
So I'm watching, actually it's on Apple TV, and it's a episodic series, and it's called Truth. And there's another one called Servant that I've been watching. They're just, they're kind of interesting, but kind of mindless too. And it helps to have that going on. And then you walk away from it and you can solve a problem sometimes, and you don't even realize it's going on in the back of your head.
I love it. I love it. Oh, all this advice is so good. And I mean, I had the first 2 books on my list, but I didn't have originals. So, I read the first 2 already. So I'm really looking forward to reading originals. So thank you so much.
Yes.
And then I will check out those Netflix picks as well. So thank you for that. I really, really appreciate that. So I want to close with this. Doug wrote in the chat, Dr. Croak makes me want to be a better person and educator right now. And I think that that's true from all of us that have listened to you today, Dr. Croak. You're truly an inspiration, not just to the youth, but to really all of us. I think you just communicated so well how easy it is for us to solve the problems around us, right? To gather inspiration, to just make it a part of daily life, to become an expert and innovate and continue to work towards creating those solutions that will help not just a small subset, but really help the entire world, and that there's so many inventions going forward in the future that are to come. And so I just really look forward to, all of our youth, to Oscar, to Leslie, to Ariana, and every other young inventor who's in the audience. I just look forward to seeing what you invent. I mean, there are things that we can't even picture right now that will be things that are things that are so important to our life in the future, and they haven't even come yet. So I can't wait to see what you guys do with those. Thank you again, Dr. Croak, for joining us today. Really appreciate your time. And now I'll turn it over to Corey, who will continue on our programming.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Dr. Jones-Davis and Dr. Croak. What an extraordinary conversation. The students that we saw, again, another big thanks to you, Leslie, Oscar, and Ariana, and to all of you for the great questions and comments that you were sharing in the session chat. This conversation is going to be really critical for us as we, again, think about the future of invention education and the future of the Invention Education Network. So those are going to be our big tasks as a network over the course of the next 2 days. But I am so sorry to say that now is the time to say goodbye to all of our InventEd Inspire guests. This is the close of our programming for Inspire today. We have been incredibly glad to have you with us and welcome new folks into these conversations. I really do want to encourage you to feel free to stay in the Attendify, feel free to chat and connect with members on that platform. And also, if you have any specific questions or connections that you want to make, you can reach out to Erin Toshin, who you've met as the network lead, and she can help make any of those connections. She'll also be sending a follow-up email to you all, and we look forward to getting a chance to be together again in the future. For our network members who are going to be continuing with us today, we're going to give you a few minutes. Stretch your legs, rest your eyes, rehydrate, connect with other members as you like. So we will have 10 minutes before our next session begins. So as a reminder, we will be on a different link for that session. So you can click down to the next session in Attendify. I know you all also have it on your calendars as well. So we will be switching again to a different version of the tool that lets us collaborate, break out into smaller groups. And our first job in our next session is going to be to really take all of the conversations we've had yesterday and today and think about how we build our priorities as a network going forward. So we will see all of our members back in 10 minutes. And again, Invent Ed Inspire, thank you so much for being with us today.